Hello and welcome to the Newsmax Daily for a historic Friday, May 31st, 2024.
They don't accuse anybody else for the same thing.
This thing, isn't a real case. It just seems to me like the fix was in that they were out to get Trump, but I think he's going to get more popular with the American people as a result of this.
Not surprised.
I thought the whole trial was complete sham. He went in there to a place that voted 88% Democrat, and then the judge literally instructed the jurors on, here's a bunch of things you can possibly find him guilty.
Comments from people on the streets of New York City last night after Donald Trump became the first U.S. president to be convicted of a crime, as a New York jury of 12 found him guilty on all 34 counts related to falsifying documents to cover up a payment to an adult film actress and extortionist Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Sentencing is now set for July 11th. That is days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. And then, of course, there will most likely be an appeal. We'll get into that. Ahead of his planned news conference today, the former president again spoke outside the courtroom yesterday, vowing to continue the fight.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent, and I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now, from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Why should voters vote for him?
The last thing you heard there is a reporter asking Trump if he's going to drop out, right after he said he will continue to fight for the country and that justice will come on Election Day. Are you going to drop out? I have reaction and commentary from almost every Newsmax host and guests from the legal world to lawmakers in Washington. Let's start it off with Greg Kelly, who spoke with Robert Costello, Michael Cohen's former legal advisor who testified in the trial.
Robert Costello joins us now. Welcome back, sir. Congratulations and thank you for everything you tried to do to bring justice. Your reaction first to what happened today.
Well, my first reaction was that I was stunned. I expected a hung jury only because it's New York County. If it was any other county, I would have expected an acquittal based upon the evidence or the lack thereof. So naturally, when this thing came out just about 5 o'clock, I think tonight, I was stunned. And then I was angry. Angry that we had 12 people in the city of New York that were that stupid to believe the story that the DA was selling, which was completely contrary to what Michael Cohen told my partner, Jeff Citron, and myself on April 17th, 2018, when he was suicidal and desperately seeking a way out of his criminal problems. We made it clear that the way out of his criminal problems would be to cooperate against Donald Trump if he had truthful information. And I repeat, if he had truthful information, because I kept on going over that same point again and again and again with him to make sure that he wasn't going to make something up in order to try to get out of his problems. He said that the idea to pay Stormy Daniels was his and his alone, and that he had nothing. I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. Well, at the same time, during that 2-hour meeting, he constantly said, guys, because he knew Jeff Citron for 10 years, he said, guys, I want you to understand, I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend a day in jail.
Well, he wound up going to jail.
He did.
Let me ask you this, though. You said that meeting. It was more than one meeting. He was on the phone with you incessantly, right? He made it seem that, it was a one-off or whatever, and you wanted in. He was almost bothering you, barraging you with calls and texts, right?
70 calls. I didn't add them up, but the district attorney's office did. 70 calls from or to Michael Cohen, call me back, et cetera. He was constantly seeking information. But his story never changed with us, that he had nothing on Donald Trump and that it was his idea to pay off Stormy Daniels. How the jury could believe a guy like Michael Cohen is just beyond me. So after the stage of being stunned and then being angry, then I started thinking about this. There are just so many holes in this case that there is an absolute guaranteed reversal on appeal.
That is Michael Cohen's former legal advisor and defense witness, Robert Costello, who was not permitted to tell his whole story or say everything he wanted to say during his testimony in the trial on Greg Kelly Reports last night. Rob Schmitt spoke with former Trump attorney and senior counsel for the American Institute for Law and Liberty, Jessie Binnall.
Jessie, obviously it's a tough night for the team. This was a hard-fought case. You guys were set up to fail. Let's be honest. You couldn't have been more set up to fail than with this case, with the venue, with the judge. Your thoughts?
Well, the judge was very clear from the beginning that he was going to ensure a conviction against Donald Trump. Right. He made that clear from the scheduling for the trial. He made that clear from the selection of jurors, making sure that any fair-minded juror was excluded from the jury panel. He made it clear when he conducted the trial and let Stormy Daniels say whatever she wanted from the witness stand. And then the minute Bob Costello said anything he didn't like, he read him the riot act. He made it very clear from the jury instructions when he just said it was too confusing to properly instruct the jury on the law, and that they didn't need to be unanimous on an underlying crime, which was absolutely preposterous. This judge was out from the beginning to get Donald Trump. He brought, Marxism to America through this show trial, through this kangaroo court. And so, I think that the president's legal team in this case did a masterful job. It could have been a masterclass on trial advocacy from Todd Blanche.
Right. How about Bragg coming out there to brag about his victory and putting Colangelo right next to him? And talking about how wonderful and how credible the team were. What did you make of that?
Yeah, that's right. Let's remember that Michael Colangelo is somebody whose name Donald Trump can't mention without going to prison. Right. But Alvin Bragg puts him front and center at a press conference, just taunting the fact that he has also taken and attacked the First Amendment to the United States Constitution by, making it so that the leading candidate for president of the United States can't talk about one of his employees. And he puts him right up there on the stage like that, a man who left not only the Biden Justice Department, but left his consulting gig with the Democratic National Committee a few years ago as well to go and prosecute his political opponent. That is not the way our justice system is supposed to work. We are supposed to pursue crimes, not individuals. And Michael Colangelo was very clear in moving from the United States Justice Department, the most big and powerful law firm in the world is what they're very proud about, to go to a county district attorney's office and pursue a political opponent. It was disgusting that Alvin Bragg did this today. And Judge Merchan, the fact he signed on to that gag order should be very ashamed of himself.
Again, that is attorney Jessie Binnall, who has previously represented President Trump in other cases. As he said, Punctuating how politically motivated all of this is, District Attorney Alvin Bragg gave a victory-type speech after the verdict. Jessie also said he thought Trump's legal team did a masterful job. Legal expert and renowned attorney Alan Dershowitz completely disagrees.
I predicted it, of course, in my book, Get Trump, and now I'm going to predict that the first thing Trump does is fire his lawyers, which he should have done before the trial rather than after the trial. His lawyers did not do a good job. And what worries me as an appellate lawyer is that they didn't do a good job preserving the record for appeal. They focused exclusively on the trial, which is what many trial lawyers erroneously do. You know that because you and I met over an appeal many, many years ago, which we both won. But you can't win an appeal if the lawyers below didn't create a record for appeal, and they didn't do that here, particularly the missing witness, the issue of the failure to allow the expert witness to testify, even though the prosecution
is that
was
not preserved?
To say, well,
are you telling me that because that's pretty. I mean, not preserving an issue for appeal is pretty fatal for a trial lawyer. I mean, that's sort of routine. I mean, it is routine.
Yeah, they did a very bad job on the issue of the missing witness.
Newsmax legal analyst Alan Dershowitz hashing it out with attorney and host Greta Van Susteren. They go back and forth for a few minutes on a bunch of legalities and then get to the appeal.
But I can tell you, I was in the courthouse enough, and I know enough about this to know this was not a distinguished performance by a great defense lawyer. Trump could have gotten a lot better, and I hope he gets a lot better on appeal, even though it's going to be hard to win this appeal. No judge in New York is going to want to have to go to events in New York and people point the finger at him saying, that's the guy who allowed Trump to run for president. He's the reason that he's our next president. Nobody wants that in New York, and so it's very hard to get a fair shake in New York at the trial level or even at the appellate level. Yeah.
Well, even if you didn't have that demographic, how about this? You're charged with falsifying business records to perhaps influence an election, whatever that crime is. I don't know. First of all, if it's a federal crime, the New York State has no business prosecuting because it's not within their jurisdiction. But in the meantime, the judge permits into evidence Stormy Daniels to come into court and describe the president's sexual positions, apparently, and what he was wearing has nothing to do with the trial whatsoever. And he permits the jury to hear it. The prosecution had to know that she was going to blurt that out. There's no way you can cure that. There was absolutely zero probative value, but it's just one more sort of effort to poison the jury. It's not to be fair.
Yeah, but they didn't object sufficiently, according to the judge.
So there are, according to the experts, a bunch of grounds for appeal. So far, most legal experts are talking about Alvin Bragg, the New York district attorney, bringing federal charges being one of the keys, and then the Stormy Daniels testimony being another. For more on Trump's appeal, let's go to former acting attorney general Matthew Whitaker and Newsmax host Lydia Serrani.
Joining me now to further discuss this historic verdict. Again, President Trump found guilty on all counts, 34 counts, each criminal count charge, carrying 4 years behind bars, former U.S. Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. And of course, Matt Whitaker, you've also been in the courthouse there. How can this be? How could this happen? This is America. This is democracy. This isn't the Soviet Union. This isn't some banana republic. How can this happen?
Well, it's good to be with you, Lydia. It's very sad, very inconsistent with, I think, what a lot of us believe are the ideals of this country. Obviously, President Trump and his team will immediately appeal, and they have very, very strong arguments. This case will be reversed, certainly on appeal, because of those strong arguments, like the violation of his constitutional rights, including his 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendment rights, these jury instructions, what the prosecution was allowed to argue at closing, the admission of all the Stormy Daniels testimony. There's just so many errors that were made by Judge Merchan. But again, the deck was stacked against President Trump. I mean, he couldn't get a fair trial. The jury pool was 85% Biden voters. Judge Merchan was a Biden donor. And, the prosecutor was backed by George Soros to get his job in the first place. So this is not recognizable as an American system of justice. It's a very sad day. And, let's just hope that the courts that aren't as passionate with their Trump hatred will give a fair resolution. But ultimately, it's going to be after the November election. I can't imagine a appellate court moving fast enough.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who was a clerk in the Supreme Court and spent many years as a practicing attorney, was on Newsmax last night as well.
And I believe this decision will be reversed on appeal. I think it is a certainty that it will be reversed on appeal. But I think in all likelihood that will happen after the election. And the entire purpose of this sham prosecution was the two words you read right before you had me on. You read Joe Biden's campaign statement, and with words that surprise nobody on planet Earth, they refer to Donald Trump as a, quote, convicted felon. You and I are going to hear those words repeated by Democrats and the corporate media about 1 billion times between now and Election Day. That was the whole point, is to scream felon, 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 felon. This was politics and not law.
The statement also says, Senator, the threat Trump poses to our democracy has never been greater. Is Trump a threat to our democracy? Is it that fragile? And what is it that Trump's going to do to it?
Not remotely. And there is an irony, which is that whatever the left accuses their opponents of doing is almost without exception what, in fact, they are doing. So every Democrat beats their chest and says, we must defend democracy, we must defend democracy, when they are mounting the greatest assault on democracy America has ever seen. I got to tell you, Sigmund Freud, I think, is spinning in his grave because the Freudian projection we are seeing is remarkable. In over 200 years of our nation's history, there has never been a former president or a sitting president indicted. Not once. And by the way, we've had former presidents who the other party hated, and yet they didn't indict them. They didn't prosecute them. That's something banana republics do. In the last year,
well, it's interesting that you raised that, because the irony of it, that whole irony thing, is that during the Trump 2016 campaign, they had that slogan that he would get his crowds to lock her up, yep, referring to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. But he never ever tried to lock her up. He never used his Justice Department to do something. But but the mantra about Trump doing that, and yet he had the perfect opportunity, he never did.
That's exactly right. And look, Democrats argue that Trump will be an authoritarian, Trump will be a dictator. Listen, he was president for 4 years. He didn't do any of that. You look at his Department of Justice, he didn't use it to persecute his enemies. You look at the laws, he followed the laws. He didn't issue lawless executive orders.
That's Texas Senator and attorney Ted Cruz on the record with Greta Van Susteren. And this is all that everyone really wants to know now, right? What does it mean? Years ago, I had a friend that always used to say that. What does it all mean? So what happens going forward?
In light of the fact that he will soon be convicted, I mean, technically you're not convicted till sentencing, is that any impediment to running a state felony conviction or even a federal felony conviction to run for president?
Zero whatsoever. The Constitution does not require that you not be a felon. He is still eligible. He is still on every ballot in America. There's no requirement in the Constitution that you not be a felon. In fact, you could be incarcerated. You could be on death row and still technically be eligible to be president of the United States. And so he will remain on the ballot, which, as you noted, the Biden administration acknowledged. This was never about removing him from the ballot. This is all about politically smearing him. This is all about giving Democrats and the media those two words, convicted felon to use. And by the way, I do not believe he will go to jail. That will be one of the questions people will talk about now is will they try to put him in jail right now? Even this rabid left-wing judge, I don't think will order him to go to jail. I think if he did, it would be immediately reversed. And I think if through some miracle they actually sent him to jail before the election, I think it would politically backfire, and I think Trump would win over 300 electoral votes because people would see it as a brazen abuse of power.
Again, that's Texas Senator Ted Cruz with Greta Van Susteren. And as we discussed yesterday, as you heard from some people at the open of the podcast, people have already seen it as a brazen over abuse of power, right? Some people. Others, they are eating it up. As Mr. Cruz said, we'll hear convicted felon Donald Trump about 1 million times or more between now and November. Every show on MSNBC will open with the twice impeached convicted felon former President Donald Trump. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. commented on it during an event in Austin, Texas last night.
My belief is that it will end up helping President Trump among America, a large part of American public who believes that the judicial system and the enforcement system have been weaponized.
Independent presidential candidate RFK Jr. in Texas last night. By the way, did you hear earlier in the week, or maybe it was last week, Chucky Todd said that they should allow RFK Jr. into the debate because his voice would actually help Biden. People would be paying so much attention to RFK's voice that it would take some of the attention off of Biden. Even Andrea Mitchell tried to jump out in front and say, well, he does have a condition. And you don't hear anybody giving him any blowback about it, right? Just like the Ronna McDaniel comments. So yesterday's verdict, Trump's comments today, the upcoming sentencing and expected appeal will dominate the news today for sure. But in other news, thousands of people crossed the U.S. southern and northern borders illegally and unvetted in the past 24 hours. Americans' credit card debt is pushing record highs due to ongoing record high inflation, evidenced in today's release of the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index. This week, we honored American heroes, including the 13 that lost their lives in the botched Afghanistan pullout. The president, who for some reason went home to Delaware in the middle of the week ahead of his son's criminal gun trial on Monday, starting where? In Delaware, continues to buy votes with his $1 trillion student debt relief package that the Supreme Court told him he couldn't do. All while China is buying up farmland in the U.S. And oh yeah, there are 2 wars happening that we're funding, but in less than 10 years, your Social Security is going to be cut. Awesome. More from South Carolina Senator Nancy Mace on American Agenda.
They want this headline. They don't want to talk about immigration because Joe Biden has a wide open border. He's allowed over 9 million illegals to cross in this country. And guess what? Every state's now a border state. He doesn't want to talk about the infant that was killed just a few weeks ago in my district in Bluffton, South Carolina by an illegal who was drinking under the influence and behind the wheel. They don't want to talk about Lake and Riley. They don't want to talk about Maddie Hines in the upstate of South Carolina, again, killed on the road by an illegal. We were all safer under Donald Trump. And if we're talking about immigration, Joe Biden is losing.
I think that's an excellent point. He's losing on a lot of things, as Bob pointed out. Also, Congressman, what do you make of the fact that the Biden campaign, specifically President Biden, plans to speak after the verdict comes out in this trial? We didn't hear from him for a really long time on those campus protests, and he tends to go silent on a lot of the other important issues, except for this one. He plans to have an opinion.
Right. I mean, if that doesn't tell you that this is strictly political, I don't know what else will. And it's really important that we look at all those who will be voting in November and try to win people back over, centrists and moderates, left of center, right of center, because this is a massive injustice. And I'm talking to independent voters every single day because I'm in the fight of my life in an election with Kevin McCarthy coming after me with $6 million right now. And I'm listening to voters and hearing what they're saying, and they're getting on board the Trump train. And we need to make sure we get every single person to recognize the injustices that are happening to Donald Trump, the politicization, weaponization of our justice system by Joe Biden, and how he's trying to steal an election with the mainstream media and by trying to get his opponent thrown in jail. That's what he's trying to do.
South Carolina Senator Nancy Mace on Newsmax. Be sure to keep up with all the news all day long on Newsmax, Newsmax Plus, and Newsmax.com. It's available on most major cable systems, including AT&T, Armstrong Cable, Cox, Comcast, Hotwire, Mediacom, Spectrum, Suddenlink, as well as Dish, DirecTV, Xfinity, and many others. And make sure you're streaming the new Newsmax Plus. If you're not, simply go to Newsmax Plus, get signed up. You can get a free trial trial. It includes all of your favorite shows and hosts, like Rob Schmitt tonight, Greg Kelly, Eric Bolling, Greta Van Susteren, Carl Higbee, with fantastic analysis from people like former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, Governor Mike Huckabee, who I'm sure we'll be hearing from today, Professor Alan Dershowitz, and many others. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you sincerely for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Share it with your friends and family. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a fantastic weekend, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to Newsmax.com. Start today. Newsmax is real news for real people.